It was a quiet summer evening in the small suburban town of Brookside, Pennsylvania. The kind of place where neighbors knew each other's names, kids rode bikes down tree-lined streets, and front porches were filled with laughter and lemonade on warm nights. Nestled between perfectly trimmed lawns and American flags stood the home of James and Sarah Collins, a couple in their early 30s, married for 5 years, both working steady jobs and living what most would call the American dream. But like many marriages, theirs had begun to settle into routine. James, a mechanic with hands that never seemed clean, had grown distant. Sarah, a school teacher with a love for wine and weekend novels, felt increasingly alone. Their sex life had become mechanical, scheduled, almost obligation-based. Emotions were buried beneath bills, responsibilities, and the slow erosion of passion. One Friday night, everything changed. The Hendersons moved in next door 2 months earlier. Chris and Lisa Henderson, charming, flirtatious, and seemingly perfect. They threw a welcome party the first week they arrived, grilling burgers and playing old vinyl records while the neighborhood mingled. It was at that party that James first caught Lisa's eye, or so he thought. It started harmless enough. A few shared drinks, late-night conversations over fences, and mutual jokes about suburbia. Then came the subtle touches, Lisa brushing her hand against James's arm when she passed him a beer, or Chris winking at Sarah when their husbands made crude jokes. There was an electricity in the air, unspoken but unmistakable. Then one night, after a particularly wild block party, Lisa invited Sarah and James over for dessert. No one else around, just wine, music, and the promise of something more. At first, Sarah hesitated, but there was something intoxicating about the idea. James, eager and curious, agreed before she could protest. What began as a flirty threesome turned into a secret monthly ritual. The Collins and Henderson couples met in the dead of night, behind closed blinds, letting desire take control. What felt exciting at first slowly became compulsive. James found himself craving the thrill, and Sarah, though conflicted, couldn't pull away either. But secrets in Brookside rarely stay buried, and not everyone enjoys sharing. On the night of October 3rd, the familiar knock came from next door. Lisa stood there wearing only a robe, asking if they wanted to come over. It was raining, dark, and the streetlights flickered. James and Sarah exchanged glances. Something felt off. That night, no one expected it to end in blood, but by morning, the entire neighborhood would be silent. Not out of peace, but fear. And across town, Detective Mark Ellison was already getting the call. Detective Mark Ellison had seen a lot in his 23 years on the force. He'd walked into homes where children were murdered, lovers who turned violent, and families torn apart by greed. But nothing prepared him for what he found at the Henderson house. It was just after 5:30 a.m. when the call came in. A neighbor reported hearing loud arguing around midnight, followed by a scream that cut through the quiet like a knife. No one thought much of it at first, maybe a couple fighting or kids messing around, but by dawn, the silence felt wrong. When Lisa's best friends showed up with coffee and pastries for their usual Saturday morning walk and found the front door wide open, she knew something was terribly off. Ellison arrived with 2 patrol officers and a crime scene unit already setting up yellow tape. The rain from the night before had left everything damp and slick. Fallen leaves clung to the pavement like ghosts. As they stepped inside, the smell hit them immediately, iron-rich and unmistakable. The living room was a war zone. Furniture overturned, glass shattered, and blood smeared across the white walls like some grotesque abstract painting. A trail of crimson led down the hallway toward the bedrooms. In the center of the room lay Chris Henderson, face down, his head twisted at an unnatural angle. His shirt was soaked in blood, and there was a deep gash across his neck. A broken lamp lay beside him, its cord frayed and stained. Lisa was found in the bedroom upstairs, slumped against the bedpost, her robe soaked through with blood. Her eyes were wide open, frozen in horror. There were bruises on her neck and a kitchen knife protruding from her chest. It looked like she had tried to fight back. No sign of James or Sarah Collins. Ellison moved through the house carefully, taking notes, snapping mental pictures. Something about this wasn't random. This was personal, passionate, violent. The lack of forced entry meant whoever did this was known to the victims. And the fact that both bodies were still warm indicated the murders happened no more than 6 hours ago. He checked the kitchen. Open wine bottles, glasses scattered, one chair knocked over. Then he noticed something odd. Sarah's earring on the floor near the fridge. Small silver hoop. He bagged it as evidence. Back outside, Ellison lit a cigarette and stared at the house. Two dead, two missing, and a whole neighborhood watching from behind curtains, whispering, wondering. He called in backup. This wasn't just a double murder. This was going to be a media frenzy. As the sun rose over Brookside, the quiet town was waking up to a nightmare, and Detective Ellison was ready to dig deeper. By mid-morning, Brookside was crawling with police. Patrol cars lined the street, reporters gathered behind caution tape, and neighbors stood in small groups, whispering theories like gossip at a church picnic. Detective Ellison didn't have time for rumors. He needed facts. Inside the Collins house, just next door, the air felt different, tense, like something had been left unsaid. The front door was locked when officers arrived, but James answered within seconds, eyes bloodshot, face pale. Sarah sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, staring blankly at the floor. They were both still in their clothes from last night. Ellison started with James. "Where were you between midnight and 3 a.m., Mr. Collins?" James hesitated just long enough to raise suspicion. "We were home," he said, voice low. "We went to bed early. Sarah didn't look up." "You sure about that?" Ellison asked, pulling out his notebook. "Neighbors heard arguing coming from the Henderson house around midnight. Screaming. You didn't hear anything?" "No," James said too quickly. Ellison studied them both. He knew liars. And these two, they weren't telling the whole truth. He turned to his partner. "Bag their clothes. Check for injuries or bloodstains." As officers escorted James and Sarah separately for questioning, Ellison met with the lead forensic investigator, who had begun collecting evidence from both homes. "There's blood everywhere," the investigator said. "Most of it belongs to Chris and Lisa, but we found traces of another DNA sample on Lisa's fingernails. She scratched someone before she died. That was promising." Back at the station, Ellison began piecing things together. First, the timeline. Neighbors reported hearing loud voices at the Henderson house around 11:45 p.m. One resident claimed to see James leaving the Henderson house shortly after midnight, though he couldn't be certain due to the rain and darkness. A scream, female, was heard around 12:10 a.m. Then silence. Next, the suspects, James Collins. Married to Sarah, known to have a temper when pushed. Friends described him as quiet but intense. Had been spending more and more time with the Hendersons over the past few months. Motive? Jealousy, anger, maybe even betrayal. Sarah Collins. Emotionally distant from James. Close friends hinted at marital issues. Was seen arguing with Lisa during a neighborhood barbecue 2 weeks ago. Motive? Perhaps jealousy or resentment toward the affair. Chris Henderson. Deceased. But according to multiple sources, including local bartenders and mutual friends, he had recently become possessive of Lisa. Told one friend he thought James was getting too close to her. Motive? If he discovered the full extent of the threesomes, he might have snapped. Lisa Henderson. Also deceased, but she had a history of manipulation. Multiple people mentioned she enjoyed playing games, emotionally toying with others. Motive? Could have provoked the fight intentionally, or tried to end the arrangement, causing chaos. Ellison reviewed security footage from nearby houses. Nothing clear, but one blurry clip showed a figure entering the Henderson house around 11:50 p.m. Tall, male build, wore a dark hoodie. It could be James, but it wasn't conclusive. Then came the phone records. James had sent a text to Lisa at 11:37 p.m. "We need to talk, now." And 10 minutes later, Lisa replied, "You're making this worse than it already is." It was starting to look personal, but Ellison needed more. He ordered a full background check on both couples. Financials, social media, everything. What he found would change the case forever. The deeper Detective Ellison dug, the more twisted the case became. He started with financial records. At first glance, both couples appeared financially stable. Nothing out of the ordinary. James Collins worked at a local garage and had a steady income. Sarah taught third grade and brought in a decent salary. The Hendersons were slightly wealthier. Chris was a real estate agent. Lisa worked part-time as a makeup artist, and they owned rental properties across town. But then came the debts. Chris Henderson had taken out multiple high-interest loans over the past year. Tens of thousands of dollars, all unexplained. He'd also maxed out 2 credit cards and sold off personal assets. His vintage motorcycle, a Rolex watch, even his late father's wedding ring. Why? Ellison ordered a deep dive into Chris's bank accounts. What he found made his stomach turn. Every month for the last 6 months, Chris had received large cash deposits from an unknown source. No names attached, no paper trail. It was classic black market money laundering, or something worse. Then there was Lisa. Her phone records showed frequent calls to a burner number registered under no name. Text messages between her and this mystery person were cryptic. "It's getting too hot. We need to stop. You said this would be easy money. If you blow this now, we're both done." Ellison turned next to social media. Both couples were active online. Happy photos, smiling faces, 4th of July barbecues, neighborhood potlucks. But beneath the surface, things weren't so picture perfect. Lisa had posted a photo 3 weeks prior, just a casual selfie in front of the mirror. Nothing unusual except for one detail. Behind her, barely visible on the dresser, was a small silver gun, a .380 semi-automatic. Detective Ellison immediately requested a search warrant for the Henderson home. Forensics confirmed it. The gun was missing. Meanwhile, James Collins' browser history revealed searches like "how to kill someone without getting caught," "best knives for self-defense," "disposing of a body in rural Pennsylvania," not proof of murder, but damn suspicious. More troubling was a hidden folder on James's laptop labeled "private." Inside were videos, explicit recordings of him and Sarah with the Hendersons. Not just consensual threesomes, but sessions that grew increasingly aggressive. One video ended abruptly mid-recording, followed by Lisa shouting, "Stop it! That's not what we agreed." James wasn't just cheating, he was controlling. And Sarah? She knew more than she let on. When Ellison confronted her again, this time alone and without James present, she finally broke down. "We didn't mean for any of this to happen," she whispered. "It started as fun, but it got weird." "What do you mean?" Ellison asked. She took a shaky breath. "Chris started acting strange a few months back. He kept asking for bigger favors. Said he needed proof of our commitment. Then he wanted us to invite other people, strangers. I refused. So did James at first. But Lisa kept pushing. Said it was exciting, that we owed them. Owed them for what?" Sarah hesitated. "For helping us. For giving us something we lost. Passion, intimacy." Ellison leaned forward. "Did Chris blackmail you?" Tears welled up in her eyes. "Yes. He threatened to show the videos to everyone if we didn't keep playing along. Even sent a screenshot to my phone once. I begged James to end it, but he wouldn't. He liked it too much." Ellison sat back. This wasn't just about jealousy or betrayal anymore. This was manipulation, control, money, and possibly organized crime. Then just as he was about to leave the interrogation room, Sarah looked up. "There's something else," she said quietly. "Last week, Lisa told me Chris was planning to leave Brookside. He was scared. Said someone was coming after him. Someone dangerous." Ellison felt the chill crawl up his spine. Someone else was involved, and they might still be watching. The interrogation room was cold. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the air smelled like stale coffee and fear. James Collins sat alone at the steel table, his hands cuffed in front of him, eyes red from lack of sleep or maybe guilt. Across from him, Detective Mark Ellison placed a folder on the table and opened it slowly. Inside were photos. Lisa's body slumped against the bedpost. Chris lying in a pool of blood. A close-up of Lisa's fingernails. Blood and skin under them. A blurry image from a neighbor's security camera showing a tall man in a dark hoodie entering the Henderson house around 11:50 p.m. Ellison didn't say anything at first. He just watched James's face. "I know what you're thinking," James finally said, voice hoarse. "But I didn't kill them." "Then tell me who did." Ellison replied flatly. James looked away. For a long moment there was silence. Then he sighed, shoulders sagging. We went over there that night, he admitted. Sarah didn't want to. She was done with all of it. But Lisa called her, said she wanted to talk, to end things, peacefully. So you went? She promised no one else would be there. Just us. Sarah thought it was time to cut ties, and for good. But something went wrong. James nodded. When we got there, Chris was already inside. He was waiting for us, angry, accusing us of trying to leave without settling up. Settling what? James swallowed hard. He said we owed them, that they had given us everything, the excitement, the escape, and now we had to pay, not just with money, but with loyalty. Ellison leaned forward. What kind of loyalty? He wanted more. More people. More videos. He said he had buyers. People willing to pay big money for what we had. He showed us emails, contracts, said if we didn't keep doing what he wanted, he'd leak everything online. Ellison scribbled notes furiously. And how did Sarah take that? She freaked out, started yelling, told him to go to hell, that she wouldn't let him ruin our lives. James paused. That's when Chris pulled out the gun. Ellison's pen stopped moving. He had the gun? James nodded. He pointed it at Sarah, said she wasn't leaving until she signed a release form, that she was part of this now, whether she liked it or not. And then what happened? James took a deep breath. I lunged at him, tried to wrestle the gun away. We fought. It went off once. Just once. But I don't think it hit anyone. Then Lisa came in screaming. She tried to pull me off Chris. Ellison narrowed his eyes. Did you kill him? No, James said quickly. Chris fell backward, hit his head on the edge of the coffee table, knocked himself out cold. So he was unconscious when you left? James shook his head. We didn't leave. Lisa was hysterical. Sarah was crying. I told them we needed to get out before someone called the cops. But then, his voice trailed off. Then what? Ellison pressed. James closed his eyes. Then Lisa said Chris knew too much, that if he woke up, he'd never stop, that he'd destroy all of us. There was a long pause. You killed him, Ellison said, not as a question. No, James whispered. Sarah did. Ellison froze. She grabbed the lamp, hit him over and over. I tried to stop her, but she wouldn't stop. By the time she did, he was gone. Ellison stared at him. And Lisa? James looked up, eyes wide. She panicked, said we had to make it look like someone broke in. She cleaned up some blood, moved stuff around. Then she ran upstairs. I heard another scream. When I got there, she was already bleeding out. There was a knife in her chest. You expect me to believe she stabbed herself? No, James said. She didn't. She was alive when I saw her last. I swear. Ellison studied him carefully. So who killed her? James hesitated again. There was someone else in the house, he finally said. Ellison's heart pounded. Who? James looked down at the table. I don't know, but I heard footsteps outside the bedroom door. Right before Lisa screamed, someone else was there. Watching. Detective Ellison stood up slowly. This wasn't over, not even close. Detective Ellison left the interrogation room with a storm brewing in his head. James Collins had just confessed to being present during Chris Henderson's death, but he claimed Sarah was the one who struck the fatal blows. He also said someone else was in the house, someone who killed Lisa after the chaos began. Ellison needed to verify everything. He went straight to Sarah Collins' holding cell. She sat on the bench, arms wrapped around her legs, eyes swollen from crying. When she saw him, she didn't speak. I just talked to your husband, Ellison said, watching her closely. He says you killed Chris. Sarah looked up slowly, tears still fresh. I didn't have a choice. Ellison pulled up a chair and sat across from her. Tell me what happened. She took a deep breath. We were supposed to meet Lisa alone. We thought it was over. But when we got there, Chris was waiting. He was furious, said we owed them, that they had people, investors, who wanted more from us. He showed me disgusting things, videos of other couples, people I didn't know. He said we were part of something bigger now. Her voice cracked. He threatened to post our videos online. Said my students would see them. My parents, everyone. Ellison nodded. Then what? James tried to stop him. They fought. The gun came out. James tackled him. It went off once, but missed. Then Chris hit his head on the table. He was unconscious. And then? Sarah wiped her face. Lisa came in screaming. She begged me not to call the police. Said if Chris woke up, he'd ruin us all. That he was too far gone. That he wasn't even doing this for fun anymore. He was working for someone. Ellison leaned forward. Who? She shook her head. I don't know, but she kept saying, they'll come for us if he talks. She sounded terrified. So you hit him? Sarah swallowed hard. Yes, I didn't plan to. I grabbed the lamp and hit him once. Then again. And again. I couldn't stop. I just kept thinking about my life. Everything I worked for. My job. My students. I couldn't let him take that from me. Ellison studied her carefully. And Lisa? Sarah's eyes filled with fear. She started cleaning up, told us to leave, said she'd handle the rest. I was halfway out the door when I heard her scream. You didn't go back? I was scared. James pulled me out. We ran home. But before we did, Ellison raised an eyebrow. What? There was someone else in the house, she whispered. I saw a shadow near the hallway. A man, tall, wearing a black hoodie, watching us. Ellison felt his pulse quicken. Back at the evidence room, he ordered another review of the security footage. This time, he focused on the Henderson house's backyard. There was a gate leading to a narrow alley between houses. Most neighbors used it to move between yards without walking around the block. The footage was grainy, but clear enough. At 12:17 a.m., just minutes after James and Sarah fled the scene, a figure in a black hoodie entered through the back gate. No face visible. Walked straight into the house. Left 10 minutes later. No one had noticed this before. Ellison cross-referenced the timeline with phone records. One detail stood out. Just before midnight, Lisa had sent a final text to an unknown number. It's happening tonight. Please be ready. Someone was coming. But who? Ellison expanded the suspect list. If Chris was laundering money, blackmailing couples, and running some kind of illegal operation, there had to be someone pulling the strings. He revisited the financials. This time, he focused on Lisa's bank account. One transaction caught his eye. A $50,000 deposit exactly 2 weeks prior. Same day, Chris sold his father's wedding ring. The transfer came from an LLC registered in Delaware, under the name Blackwell Entertainment Group. Ellison ran the name through national databases. Nothing. But then he found a match in an old cold case file from 5 years ago. A string of blackmail-related murders in Ohio. Victims were all involved in private sex tapes. The main suspect? A man known only as Vince. No last name, no photo, just rumors. Ellison called in a favor from an FBI contact who specialized in organized crime rings. Within 30 minutes, he had a lead. Vince was real. Full name: Vincent Kessler. Former porn producer turned underground filmmaker. Ran a network of blackmail rings targeting suburban couples. Used their secrets to extort money or recruit them into producing content for his hidden streaming service. Chris Henderson had been one of his recruiters. Lisa was trying to get out, and Vincent Kessler had come to Brookside to make sure no one talked. Ellison stared at the blurry image of the man in the hoodie. This was him, the killer. Now he had to find him, before he disappeared like smoke. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained gray as Detective Mark Ellison stood outside the Brookside Police Department, staring at the evidence board in front of him. The names of the victims, Chris and Lisa Henderson, were circled in red ink. Below them were the suspects, James and Sarah Collins, and off to the side, in a box labeled Unidentified Male, Black Hoodie, was the real key to everything: Vincent Kessler. Ellison knew this wasn't over until Kessler was found. He called in every favor he had: federal agents, local police, even an old informant from his days working Vice. Within 24 hours, they had a location: a rental cabin deep in the Pocono Mountains, 2 hours northeast of Brookside. Paid in cash under a fake name. Surveillance footage from a nearby gas station showed Kessler buying supplies just 2 nights ago. He hadn't left yet. A tactical team was assembled by dawn. Ellison led the raid personally. The cabin was surrounded before sunrise. No lights on inside. No movement. SWAT breached the door with a flashbang, guns drawn. Inside it was empty, except for one thing. A laptop, still running. Open on the screen was a live feed, hidden cameras from the Henderson house. Kessler had been watching everything, including the murders. Ellison's stomach turned. They searched the cabin thoroughly, found burner phones, prepaid credit cards, and a folder full of hard drives, each labeled with couples' names, some from Brookside, others from towns across the country. This man was a predator, a ghost who thrived on fear, but now he'd made a mistake. One of the drives contained encrypted files, emails, contracts, payment logs. With help from cybercrime units, investigators decrypted the data. There it was. Proof that Chris Henderson had been working for Kessler for over a year, that he recruited couples, filmed their sessions, and sold the content online through hidden servers. Lisa tried to get out 6 months ago. She threatened to go to the police. That's when Kessler stepped in, and he didn't want her dead. Yet. He wanted control. And when Chris lost it during the confrontation with the Collins couple, Kessler saw a chance to clean up loose ends. Lisa was collateral damage. So was anyone who tried to escape. 2 days later, Vincent Kessler was arrested at a bus station in Scranton. He was disguised in a baseball cap and sunglasses, trying to blend in with travelers heading north. He didn't resist. At his arraignment, prosecutors charged him with first-degree murder, Chris and Lisa Henderson, conspiracy to commit blackmail, distribution of illegal pornography, racketeering, multiple counts of witness tampering. James and Sarah Collins faced lesser charges. James pleaded guilty to obstruction of justice and assault. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison with parole eligibility after 3. Sarah accepted a plea deal for manslaughter instead of murder. Her sentence was reduced to 3 years, with time served already. She would be free in less than a year. Months later, Detective Ellison returned to Brookside. The neighborhood had changed. Fences were higher. Curtains stayed closed longer. People smiled less. He walked past the Collins house. It was empty now, up for sale. The Henderson home had been torn down entirely. Nothing left but a patch of grass and memories no one wanted to talk about. As he lit a cigarette and stared at the quiet street, Ellison thought about how easily normal lives could unravel. All it took was one secret, one invitation, one night, and suddenly everything burned. He exhaled slowly, watching the smoke rise into the sky. Justice had been served, but peace, that wouldn't come so easily.